In this video, we're going to talk about properties of trapezoids and kites. So first off, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair of parallel sides. If you notice, those are my red lines over here, so my two parallel sides. The parallel sides are called the bases, so as shown in red. So the trapezoid has, let's see, two pairs of base angles, and an example of one would be angle A and angle D. So another set would be angle B and angle C is the other pair. So if you notice that they are right there and right there. So the non-parallel sides are called the legs of your parallelogram, of your trapezoid. All right, so your trapezoid ORST, which angles are supplementary. So what you need to remember is we've got two parallel lines here. We have a transversal line coming through it, and where they are going to be supplementary are going to be those consecutive interior angles. So that would be my angle R and my angle O. And another set would be, let's see, the other two sides, so angle S and angle T. And the reason for that are because those are the consecutive interior angles. So isosceles trapezoids are specific types of trapezoids, and it's because the legs are congruent to each other. So you can see my picture, my legs are congruent. And secondly, each pair of base angles is congruent to each other. So remember, my angle A is congruent to my angle D, and B is congruent to C for those angles. You can see that they're congruent to each other now. And the diagonals are congruent to each other as well. So that means that AC is congruent to BD. And make sure you have that written down because it's not drawn in the picture very well. All right, so next up, now we are talking about an isosceles trapezoid in this picture. So that means that our base angles will be the same. So if you notice right here is 85, so this other angle right next to it will also be 85. And remember that our consecutive interior angles, so that would be L and M, are going to equal 180 degrees. So I can take my 180 minus that 85, and we are left with 95 degrees. And that's what each of these angles will equal then. So since my base angles will be the same, my angle J will also be 95 degrees, which I can't really draw in there very well. And you can see I put the reasons on there of why we knew that those measurements of what they were. So make sure you put that on your paper as well. On this one, we have to remember that a mid-segment of a triangle connects the midpoints together on two sides. So when we have the mid-segment of a trapezoid, this means that our mid-segment connects two midpoints together in our trapezoid. So you have to find the midpoint of each of the legs, and then we can connect those together. So two big things is we need to remember that they're parallel to the bases, so all three segments will be parallel to each other. The other big thing is that the length of it will be half the length of the other two bases added together. So in the example down here, we can say that our x is going to be the mid-segment, so our x should equal 1/2 times the two bases added together, so my 12 plus my 28. So if I combine these two together, I get 40. When I multiply that by 1/2, I get 20 for my x. That means that the length of my MN is going to be 20, and we've got 20 inches as my units. So in this next one, we're going to do the same thing. So we need to set our 20 equal to, you need to take half of adding the bases together. So 17 plus my 7x minus 5. So I'm adding the two bases together, dividing by 2, and that equals my 20. So to simplify, I can combine my 17 and my 5 together. So I get 12 plus 7x. An easier way to get rid of this 20, not the 120, sorry, but the 1/2 is if you multiply both sides by 2 That's an easier way of getting rid of it. So we end up with a 40 equals my 12 plus 7x, because it's going to cancel out those two numbers right there. So I subtract my 12, I get a 28 equals my 7x, so x is going to equal 4. Next up, we have a kite. So a kite is a quadrilateral that has two pairs of consecutive congruent sides, but opposite sides are not congruent. So what this means when you're looking at the picture is that we have two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. If you notice they're side by side, that's what consecutive means, that they go in order. So they're not across, they're just next to each other right there. So two sets of those. And the opposite sides are not congruent to each other. So remember the not part of that. Okay, so some things that you might want to remember. If you're a kite, your diagonals are going to be perpendicular to each other. So you know that the angle that is created with the two diagonals is 90 degrees. And that means you have some right triangles in there. And you also have one pair of opposite angles are going to be congruent. And if you notice, it's between the two sides that are not the same. All right, so example 5 is a typical type of question you're going to see. So it's a kite. And the measures of the angles are going to be 3x, 75, 90, and 120. So if you notice, there are 4 sides up here, which means the sum of your interior angles are going to be 360 degrees, like we've seen in all other quadrilaterals. And we need to solve for the value of x. So we need to add these together. So 3x plus 75 plus my 90 plus my 120 has to equal my 360. So when I solve this for the x, I can combine these numbers together. So I get 3x, let's see, plus 285 equals my 360. So if I subtract that to the other side, I get 3x equals 75. So when I divide that by 3, my x is 25. But if you notice, that's not what the question is asking. It's asking what measures of the angles are congruent. So we need to put this back into the measurements, into our 3x part of that. So 3 times 25 gives us a 75. So the two measures that are congruent to each other are the 75 degrees. And the other measures I put on there, so 75, 90, and 120, so the ones that are the congruent ones are your 75 degrees. All right, so notice the next part is this bonus question. You're going to earn 1 point, but you have to have it solved correctly by the time you show me your completed notes. Some of you guys have been going back and doing this later. So remember that this is a kite. So remember some of the things that I did up above and which angles are going to be congruent to each other, because you need to remember that when you solve this one. Good luck.